Hey, Zach, what's happening, buddy?
Howdy doody. That's like my new word. I don't know why.
Yeah, man.
When was the first time that you got introduced to today's guest? Do you remember?
It's been a few years. It,
Yeah. There was like a big uproar, big uptip. People were super pumped about it.
yeah,
He's
I'm
done a
trying to
lot of
think. It's
interesting
been a
things over the
while.
years.
Yeah, it's been a while.
6, 7 years. It, in your expertise, what would a business need to do to get some of that uproar, get some of that excitement early on in the business? Because I think so many people are looking for that. Most of them don't do it, and then we'll bring him on to see what he did to do that. But what
Yeah.
would you say people need to do to
Well, it's one of
get
those
that
things, man,
exposure?
like that I tell everybody is that once you have that initial momentum, you got to keep on riding it.
Mm.
And I think that what a lot of people will do is that the momentum goes away, and then to start from zero all over again is really, really difficult. So it's like once you catch that wave, ride that wave as long as you can, and then look over your shoulder to try to find that next wave.
The sports analogy in that is, and I think a lot of coaches would agree with this. It's a lot easier to get to the top than to stay at the top, right?
Yeah.
So Georgia just won the national championship in football 2 times, and 2 times in a row. That's only happened a handful of times. And people talk about how it's actually probably easier to win than it is to actually win again. And I think it's interesting because it's like, okay, you can get this uproar, this uptick of traffic, of attention. And then next thing you know, it's like it goes away and you're like, well, I don't know how to get it again. And it's quite the
Well,
conundrum.
and the interesting thing, and then we'll officially welcome Hamilton, is that you also have a business to run. So it's like it's great to do all that press stuff and talk to people and keep that momentum, but at the same time, you still got to generate revenue. And so then there's the balancing act. And we've been it's great to have Hamilton on today because we've been trying to get Hamilton on the show for a while, and I appreciate the fact that he was like, hey man, I'm heads down right now. I am focused on selling, getting through this season. And I was like, hey, when you can make it happen, we'll make it happen. And here we are today. So welcome, Hamilton Perkins.
Yeah, appreciate the welcome, all. Thank you so much. And yeah, glad to jump in and, discuss anything that we're going to discuss today.
So what's the elevator pitch of the business? I haven't heard this from you in a while. If you meet someone in, a 4-story building, you hop in the elevator instead of taking the stairs, and then they say, you have a business. What do you do? What's your answer on that?
Yeah, today what we do, we make upcycle bags and accessories. We make them from pineapple leaf fiber, billboards, and a whole lot more. That's kind of like the quick elevator pitch. And then, depending on how many floors we have, I'll probably kind of elaborate because that usually is just enough to, get the conversation started. But whether it's plastic water bottles, it's pineapple leaves, it's billboards, clothing, textile remnant, anything that's technically sewable, we can really use it as the base material or raw materials to create something that's new. So we make backpacks and travel bags like the ones you literally wear on your back or on your body. We make fanny packs, hip bags. We make purses, wallets. And we started with the idea of we wanted to make something that was recycled, and the idea was let's find materials that are recycled. So we launched on Kickstarter, and to your point there, Tim, we had a $10,000 goal. We hit the goal in 6 days. About your point about how do you sort of get people excited, and then how do you like sustain that excitement. So we knew that we had a finite window to get a certain amount of sales and to get a certain concept proved. And so what we did, we basically used that as a forcing function to, test the idea, validate the idea, make sure that the customers were actually like there before we moved into production. And then from there, we ended up doing trunk shows. We did live events. We shipped the product, which was important because there's a crazy statistic that it's single digits. I mean, most campaigns don't actually ever ship anything. They never actually, or get funded, And so from there, we found that there was a market for wholesale, so selling products in bulk. So instead of selling them one by one, we found that we could sell them in mass. So then we started working with independent stores. So these are your stores that are your gift shops, your aquarium, locally, maybe they have a gift shop there, or a zoo, or it could be a men's store or a women's store. And these are, kind of like locations where the salespeople can actually talk about the product, educate the customer on it that's coming in there about the story and like why the product matters. And then from there,
and that's important
it's
too,
like,
because
right.
most people see it as a bag, not a recycled, not an upcycled bag. Without that story aspect of it, they might not know that there's a bigger piece to the pie, to the story in that. And that's why having that person kind of sell for you in the store was important in that vision aspect.
And it's like proximity too. Exactly. Like, when you are in a store environment, there's definitely like a certain culture there where, we felt like it was good for customers to be able to feel and touch our product, to see how it, reacts, how it lays on the body, these, kind of things that are a little bit harder to explain online or through an email or through a social media post. And so that became a part of our distribution point. And what we did was we caught the bug, because we figured out like how effective physical retail, even though it may not be the most glamorous thing to talk about, it actually works. Customers walking in a store or a space and, finding meaning in what we do and using that as a way to educate them, create a relationship. So we ended up opening our own pop-up store. And around that same time, we were getting contacted by companies to help them with, let's say, recycle or to make gifts. And we found that, the very first, I'll never forget, the very first one that kind of set it off for us was Zappos.com. So they contacted us. Well, actually, we met them at a show, and then we were showing them our collection, and they, come up with this idea about, we could basically take their trash. This is something that we've been doing kind of the whole time. Like, we've always, worked with agencies, we've always worked with nonprofits to get signs, fabric, things that, have no use. And, just to give you a visual for, for anyone that's like actually watching this stuff on the video side of it, this is what we're talking about. Like, it's, literal material that is used as a sign or used in some advertising capacity that's being repurposed into something that can be either worn as a bag or even, wallets or even other applications. So with Zappos, they sent us, a big shipment of all their, conference step and repeat banners, stuff that they had been using. And, we found that there was a market for, basically working directly with a company that has their own waste that they want to see repurposed. We can use whatever we can for their application. And then whatever is left, we can create our own collections with that. And so that created this whole like business unit of ours, basically, where, we can work on whether it's client gifts, employee gifts, or even items for resale. So in their case, they did a little mix of both. They did resell because they have a small shop within the headquarters, and then they also gifted it to some of the executives. So that just led to us doing, projects for Coachella. We've done stuff for, multiple Fortune 500 companies, the New York City Sanitation Department, and, lots of big tech companies, lots of startups, venture backed, private equity backed, independent owned. It really doesn't matter kind of like where you are in the journey. We do have something that can be of use, whether it's, even if your company doesn't have waste, we have enough waste on our own. So you're simply empowering our mission by working with us in a partnership. So that's kind of where we've gone. So we decided we were going to close the store. We kept it open. It was initially a 3-month run. That was the idea. It was a pop-up. And we ended up going close to 15 months total, just with the success, just riding on it back to back, month to month. And it actually worked out really well because, we learned a lot about just general product development, customer acquisition, live events, branding. It really was like a test bed for a ton of things that we were up to. It was a 4,000 square foot former Banana Republic location that had, another, maybe call it 1,500 square feet of kind of like office and, workspace where we would house, tens of thousands of pounds of waste that we were, planning to recycle or upcycle into our collection. And, we kind of found throughout the journey also that there is a distinction between recycling and upcycling. So recycling is a way of actually taking something that is meant for trash or it's bound to go to the trash. And then we're just simply, keeping it as at an equal value. Basically, we're not necessarily adding value to it. But what upcycling is it's taking something that maybe has, no value or, potentially like negative value. And then we're raising the value of it by turning it into something that can then be remarketed, reused, and, a consumer can go on to use for years and years again. So it's this whole idea of completing this loop of circularity. Along the way, we've been fortunate, going back to the, early days. PR has been really good. We've gotten in places like Fast Company, Forbes, Washington Post, just to name a few, and even the Ellen Show. We've worked with tons of Fortune 500 companies. We work with celebrities. We work with all the whole gamut. We have a solution for you if you're if this is if you're listening to this and you've got a small brand or a big brand. We probably have a way to work together.
Because taking that back, I mean, it's really I going back to Zach's initial thing about like, when was the first time that we met, and it was like it's super compelling in the sense of, just like you said, you take pineapple leaves, plastic water bottles, the vinyl from billboard signs or what have you, and then you can create the your bags, and it's just like, walk us through that, how that whole process takes place, and then when you're done with that, I have a follow-on question that I want to touch on.
Yeah, so it starts typically with, where are we starting technically? And that's kind of a funny way, but like, is this an existing partnership where, we're already sitting on a certain amount of material that, let's say, has branded or, has been, kind of like shaped to this client's, idea? Or is this something like brand new that will require like, prototyping, sampling, et cetera? But once we really decide on what the product's going to be, we can then take kind of like this reverse engineering approach. If we know that we need a travel bag that's going to be customized and it's going to have, a certain element of pops of color, maybe from, let's say, like fabric remnant or fabric signs, like something like these, then from there we can turn around and say, okay, well, how many of these are we going to make? We can afford to cut this many pieces of that material. There's a prepping process. We need to make sure the materials are cleaned and sterilized, and make sure that everything that maybe a part of the element that it came from is not like included in the finished product. And then there's a kind of we have to have a pattern. So patterns have to be turned into a physical product. It's one thing when it's on paper and it's on a computer aided design or in a technical pack. But once you actually translate that into something that's physical, it's like a whole different, sometimes there's like things that have to be corrected or they may be missed. So you want to make sure that all that is like approved. And then once you're moving into sampling, now you're in the, okay, we can start to actually move into production. So we can, look at producing this on a mass scale. So, we're not just making a couple of these, we're making, we may be cutting, thousands of yards of material or something at once. And then we'll go back and then we'll sew all those materials. And finally, there's like the finished product where we're shipping. Now, it does depend on where, like I say, where we're going with this, because sometimes, like I say, a client may really want a cool gift and we can actually achieve that with what we already have, and they have a short lead time. But it might be another client that, maybe they have more time and this is more like open-ended and more of a creative project. So then we'll be a lot more hands-on in terms of, the design, sending ideas. We'll have more of a kind of a mood board, a vision board of like, these are the looks that we're kind of going for. Here are references, here's here's options. We have a design team in-house, so we can share that with the client and let them know this is like what we're planning for this collaboration. How do you feel about these options? So it's a lot more, it's like a longer lead time or a longer process, but potentially they're like, that's still a project that, it has meaning, it has weight, just as a client that maybe doesn't have any materials and they already know exactly what they want. They don't need us to create anything from scratch. But we can make it. So, I'll talk about the Ellen project we did. So, we get this call, or not a call, we got this cold email, I'm just like thinking, is this real? Like I'm kind of like just almost not believing it, but I knew it was possible, and I think that's the important thing, it's possible. So I look and, they're just saying they want this like enormous, number of bags. And we're just like, yeah, we can get it done. Timeline, all that. In that case, we didn't necessarily have that product in stock or anything. It was really more of like coming up with a concept, coming up with a vision, aligning with like the timeline, the goals, and all these things. And then from there, we were able to position like, okay, this is the product that we think is the best fit. They really liked it. It was going in a subscription box of theirs. So they send out a subscription box to, tons of their, they have a subscription base of, customers that get products. I believe it's quarterly. And, so we were included in that. And so, we had a nice like media campaign around it. And, that was, really good. I think a good representation of like how we can work under pressure quickly, efficiently, but then, creating a brand new product like from scratch that we didn't even offer at the time.
Yeah, because that's really, and for those that are watching on the video side, we have pictures of the actual products. This is not like, I don't know if it was last year that like the weaving of the plastic bags became like a trend. We're not talking like weaving plastic bags from stores. Like we're talking like legit bags that you chose, that you wanted to have to develop a specific brand, a brand that could stand on its own, that can compete against the larger luxury brands that have that sustainability, reusability aspect to it. How did you make that decision that you wanted to go in the upscale, upper market aspect of the business?
I think I've always been, interested in just branding and high-low and luxury and sustainability and kind of where all those things collide and intersect. I mean, my background was retail, so I worked in sneaker shops. I worked in, I sold, sunglasses. I've sold shoes. I've sold bags. I've sold jerseys. I've worked in, more like I would say general retail locations or retail stores, and I've worked in more like niche, higher end retail stores. So when it comes to like, positioning and things like that, I feel like our product is definitely, you have to kind of speak to someone, I would say, and I think if you can speak to someone, then you stand a better chance of like having them hear you at least. So we felt like when we started, there really hadn't been like a brand that really kind of spoke to, a product that's upcycled or recycled, but then also has the materials to kind of like back it up. So everyone's always unique. And when you think about how much goes into it, it's not as simple as it may, on the outside appear, I mean, hopefully we make it look simple, but it takes a lot of coordination, like every time we go to get materials, like that's actually someone has to physically drive or schedule some type of shipment, like we spoke about, of those materials to go from point A to point B. And that doesn't have anything to do with making the material or making the product or branding it or customizing it or designing it or marketing it. That's just like step one. So the curation process also plays a part in this. So it's not just, let's just take every single, thing that we can get our hands on. We're trying to be as strategic as we can so that, again, this is still a consumer product. A consumer is going to carry this, and we, kind of learned that from, what is it, Warby Parker years ago. They talk about like eyeglasses. No one's going to wear eyeglasses that don't look good. Like it doesn't matter like what your social, status is. You still want something that like actually accents you and makes you, like look the way you intend to look. And so the same thing kind of applies for an accessory or, any type of fashion item. It still has to like look the part, has to look good. And so with that being the case, we figured out that we needed to make the products, unique. We knew that, here's the first prototype. These it was like, have a plan, but you may not always know exactly how you're going to achieve that plan. We knew we wanted to make this stuff from recycled stuff. That's what we knew. But the application of how it was going to actually come to be, it really came with that very first sample. Once we made it and we were using what we thought were going to be reference materials, we were using recycled materials as references only. But when we saw how unique it looked, how different it looked, how it really spoke to practically everyone that saw it, it really told us that, okay, we've got something that people really want. We don't need to, stop right there. Don't break something that's already working. So that's how we got to, hopefully that answered your question, but that's how we got to, making the product, kind of like positioning it the way it is. And our work's still not done. We still, there's a segment that we don't even speak to. There's several segments that we don't speak to that, would allow us to, do more, that would allow us to have more awareness, that would allow us to, have more impact on what we're doing. To date, we've probably, we're approaching 1 million plastic bottles that we've upcycled into this collection. So what we're looking at is, how do we, we have a big goal. We want to do 1 billion plastic bottles. So what does that take? Well, we got to expand our reach. That means we need to be in the highest markets of fashion that are available. That means we need to be in sort of a mass market. We need to be in a place where, we become sort of a household name and we're ubiquitous with, this concept in this space. So what you can expect to see from us going forward is more, I would say education, more information about, what we do, how we do it, sharing more of the storytelling element of, what we do. And, we're definitely excited for this new year.
Tim, did you ask the Chris question?
No, I was going to,
okay.
That was a good question.
So I think that the person who actually introduced me to you, Hamilton, was Chris Hill. He texted me right before the show. That sounds
right.
Yeah, he texted me right before the show and said, "Who's on the show today?" I said, "You," and he said, "Well, tell him I said hi." So, and then he's watching now.
My buddy Chris.
So he says, Tim, I'll take you off for just 2 seconds. As sustainability has become more popular in the mainstream, have you seen that as more of an opportunity with a wider customer base or more of a threat with larger companies coming into that space?
It's always been like the same concept for us because I can remember very, specifically like back in as far as like 2014 when I was still working in kind of like banking and stuff. I saw like I could count it on like one hand, like when I would Google, maybe like companies using plastic bottles to make product. And I remember like there was like Cole Haan and there was like Patagonia and it was just like maybe a few others, but they weren't like household names, let's say. So fast forward, what does that mean when there's bigger players? It does help us because what I would say is they have already spent the billions and millions to market to the customer, to get them familiar with, and this is kind of turning into a branding conversation, but now they're already familiar with, a large brand, let's just insert any brand name. So when they introduce this thing that they're doing, it is already kind of like trusted, there's always like there's a know, like, and trust factor that's already there. So we, as like a newer brand that maybe they're not familiar with, what happens is we actually benefit from them kind of educating the whole space, or like growing the whole space from that standpoint. So it actually helps us when there are bigger companies. I mean, there's still 8 billion people, plus on this on this country that is, on this planet, that it makes we, in 100 lifetimes, we wouldn't be able to solve like this one problem by, on our own. We're going to need help anyway. So I just look at it as we're now having another conversation in the mind of the consumer. Like, there's already a conversation that's in their head, and so we're integrating ourselves in that conversation. So that's kind of that Eugene Schwartz breakthrough advertising idea of like, there's already a conversation going on, you're like integrating yourself. And then there's the concept of, now they're more likely to like understand what we're talking about when our conversation happens. So our conversation it's expedited because they know, okay, this is a thing that, a company could take, retail store display signs and turn those into bags or some other application. That's not like some far-fetched idea, because, insert media company, they have spoken about this or covered this topic at length. And so it gives us kind of this, it's a better conversation. It's a shorter conversation where, we come in with the deck and what we're doing. Let's go, let's get something going, and then lastly, like, that's the idea. We never wanted to it wasn't never set to be a monopoly of sorts. We weren't necessarily trying to, we know it's going to take more, it's going to take a lot of, if you think about like Hollywood or something, I think it's probably the best example, or America itself, how does it become that way? It's like messaging and storytelling, like repeated over and over and over, and it's not necessarily like a political statement, but it's more so about like the power of marketing and branding, like how you like actually present a message. So, we see that as like being really important for us.
Well, that aspect of it is wild. And think about what you just said from a positive or negative aspect, the way that it's messaged, the way that it's branded, the way that it's marketed. The food pyramid, right? Forever, everyone said that was the greatest thing, since sliced bread. Now you look at the food pyramid and people are like, whoa, like this is the most ridiculous thing in the world. The marketing aspect, I think about like crypto maybe 5 years ago, when you would start seeing that on the ticker, that made it, an opportunity for people that are like, well, if they're talking about it and they're showing it, then that must mean it's trustworthy enough for me to get into it. It's little things like that when they hit that, that next level, I don't know what it's really called, but like that
yeah,
the top of the mountain is it's incredibly
like
important.
Yeah, it's like psychological triggers for people. If you go to a new city and you see like 2 places to eat, one's got a line, the other doesn't. The place with the line has, all your favorite bands, like it's got people on the wall, they've signed it, they've been there, all of your food that looks really tasty. You're probably going to go with the one that's got all the social proof. And it's kind of like, in a world of marketing and busy noise and messages, it's like, that's probably what 7 to 10 things, or, maybe you talk about Robert Cialdini's influence. He talks about, I think there's like 6 things that you cover that, those are the kind of laws of influence. If you can handle those, then, you kind of can create a ownership of a space. So,
well, Chick-fil-A every day, right? They've added a 3rd line, and people will sit in that third. The Chick-fil-A by me literally has 90 cars in it every single day going to the main road, and people don't care. It's just, I'm just like, this is obnoxious. Have you seen a 3rd line, Tim? You haven't?
Yeah, no. Our local Chick-fil-A, they've remodeled like twice in the last 2 years.
It's obnoxious,
and it's just it's to add more capacity. For the
people
drive-thru.
Don't, in college, people don't go to a bad party, right? They're not going to go in the door of the bad party. And if they go into a bad party, they're going to leave, right? So people want to be a part of the popular thing. And that social proof, like you said, Hamilton, is critical. So, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You leverage that in terms of, we're going back to the opening of the show. You're on the Ellen show, and then you're able to leverage that to keep that momentum going forward. In terms of what was the first break or opportunity that surfaced in terms of approaching you that you're like, wow, this one validates, and then two puts you on the map in a bigger way than you ever thought that was going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of like if we've had breaks. I mean, I think everything's like a break, like when we made that first sample and it actually came out looking the way it did, that was like a major break. Getting the Virginia Velocity Tour grant for 25K, like that was a huge break. Being kind of in the right place at the right time to like be able to actually leave my job to focus on this is like a good break. Having like the ability to travel the country and the world to actually go and do pop-ups and meet people at trade shows and meat factories and stuff, that was a good break. Zappos, them, trusting us to take their signs and turn it into something that would be on brand, that was a good break. This past few years, even though it's been an insane, ride, it's been kind of a, repositioning or just time of reflection, I would say, that turned into a break. Someone may listen to this and be inspired and say, you know what, like, our company's got, gifts that we're looking to give to our sales team, or, we're trying to court some clients to, work with us on a SaaS deal or something. And, we just can't seem to get through to them with maybe the cold outreach approach. But what if we just send them a nice package, a good old fashioned lumpy mail, package with a branded product with a nice note and some, call to action in there to get on a call with a team like that.
There's
that
something
might be the
important.
break.
There's something important there, right? And so Tim brought up this idea after Hub's Peanuts. I believe he was the first one, which I don't know if you know Hub's out in Southampton
Smith
County, something like
Okay.
that. They create peanuts, and the nut is so big. Like, it's like he sent us a couple of them, and Marshall sent them to us, and like the nut is so much bigger than your other nut. It's so weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, but they're great tasting. Anyway, Tim came up with this idea. I think it was Tim that had this idea. Maybe Marshall had it. Maybe it was me. Who knows? Anyway, it was like, we talk about buy local all the time, but then when we buy local or these companies who do gifts, it's never local gifts.
Right.
And so it's like, what if you had, your actual local gift shop? And I'm not saying gift shop, but like gift ideas that are actually all done that are local companies. And so, someone listening to your idea, Hamilton, it's like, okay, if you're trying to gift something to a prospect or to provide a client that you love, give them a local bag. Don't buy them the Michael Kors bag, right? Give them the HPC bag. In that bag could be some Hub's Peanuts, some, I'm forgetting everything. Some
El Guapo,
some crunchy hydration,
right?
All of these little things with some stickers from something in the water, whatever it might be. With who knows what it could be. But like, if you really want to buy local in that aspect, there are ways to get really creative and showcase businesses that most people have never heard of.
Right.
And it just makes you wonder, makes you think. It's like, oh, there's a lot of creative, fun ideas that can be done with a lot of local brands that not everyone does, that most people don't do.
Yeah.
And then the other angle to approach it too is to think about, like, I believe it's a McKinsey study. They talk about the 60% cost can actually be reduced when you have sustainable procurement, and sustainable procurement can expand to local gifting. It could expand to, upcycling, like what we do. But then there's another segment that's like, I believe it's about 85% of employees, they would rather have something, that's environmentally responsible or socially responsible, as, they want to work for a company that has a strong purpose. So if you think about it in those terms, it's also like a recruiting tool. So a lot of time our clients are, we've heard of, key positions in the company being vacant and them not being able to fill it, or, there's turnover because they've actually cited like the way that company handles their sustainability and how they handle their practices around sustainability. And so, it's also kind of a way to think of recruiting. So if you're going to spend, let's say you get a great person that is in a role and they're making 100K a year, you're going to spend, I don't know your recruiting costs, but let's say they're 20K to get them in a seat. By the time you onboard them and fill it, is it worth it to, have to keep, replenishing this role, if you will, when you kind of know that they want to see more out of you in a certain category or in a certain area of your business. And that's where we come in, where, we could work with you on a gifting item for Earth Day, or we could work with you on a gifting item for a holiday, or we could work with you for a gifting item on anniversaries, or just, for a marketing campaign in general. And so that's what we've seen has been really effective. Is it's definitely a client engagement tool to get leads and to get sales. Some deals for some clients can represent, pretty big paydays. We definitely work with a company out of Paris, and we were helping them with, specifically trade show gifts, but they were unique gifts. So instead of just, like you said, like giving them something that's more mass produced, giving them something that has a purpose and a story. So we took their old signs and then reworked it into, for them, it was shave kits, little dot kits that were branded for them, and they were gifting it to their clients. And, again, these are sizable transactions. So, our costs become kind of, minuscule compared to, what it represents to bring in. And I think you see the same thing with that production of a staff or an FTE. So if you have these key roles that you're trying to recruit for, what is that employee worth to you, and what does it cost you to get them? And then kind of like, where do we fit within that? So that's just
how do you sell that? It makes a lot of sense. You're saying it. I get it. I think everyone would agree. But getting to that person that makes that decision maker,
right?
Whether who knows what that person is? It could be a marketing person. It could be the HR person. It could be the recruitment manager. Heck, it could be the CEO. It could be just a middle manager. It could be whatever. How do you get to that person and sell that to them? Because that's a difficult thing to do. And by the way, you're not wrong. $15,000-$25,000 to bring on a new employee. Like, what's $200? What's $200 with the local stuff going to do if that keeps that person for 36 more months? That's a hell of a win. Like, you got to spend that money.
And adding on to that, it's like, Hamilton, are you seeing, like, is there like a chief sustainability officer at companies that are committed to like totally renewable, like they have either a net zero carbon footprint or a negative carbon footprint? Are you seeing positions like that in existence?
Yeah, I'll take both of those. On the, like, how we sell it side of it, I think part of it really starts with kind of what we're doing right now. So it's interviews, it's content. A lot of time we're like, how did, a client find us? Normally by the time they're getting to us, they're typically like already their mindset, they're already like, oh, we saw what you did for other, brand. We want to do something similar to that. Or maybe they just want to hear us out about, like, what do we envision for what they do. And so we kind of paint a picture, that's our, secret sauce, if you will, is like, we have a vision and we can really execute on what we can kind of create. On the selling side, of course, like, marketing is also like, if you can have good marketing, hopefully your marketing is good enough that your sales is like, your marketing is kind of the real thing. So I'm not saying I don't still like subscribe to I've already quoted, Robert Cialdini once here. I would probably, say just my background coming from, banking, I definitely was fortunate to rotate through 8 out of 10 lines of business. So kind of as like the lead, salesperson, if you will, I've been able to, pick up a lot of things. I think it's about like making it's in terms of what makes sense or what will be beneficial to the client. If I know that they have some type of like problem they're trying to solve. The one good thing too, and I'm kind of all over the place, but like experience is another thing. Now I can actually say, oh, look, I've already worked with like 20 similar clients in the same, like, kind of, needing the same problem solved. And this is how we best address that with this particular product. And this is going to be the lead time. This is how we would design it, and those type of things. So I'm actually able to kind of draw on those experiences. But I really think it's also about, like, just figuring out what the customer needs in whatever scenario it is. And then I would say, as far as like a sustainable role, we've had a lot of conversations with sustainability employees and directors of sustainability and executives at companies. And I find that we definitely have, this is kind of it's not like always one role that like basically is like the decision maker. It's usually kind of this, it's like a consensus situation. So it might be, excuse me, our projects in many times or cases, they go up to the C-suite, and it's not just marketing, or it's not even just sustainability. It's the entire like C-suite in many cases, and sometimes it's even on the board level. A lot of time, and sometimes it is the board level. I've also seen it, from the like employee level. Like I've seen it like start on the front lines in the trenches and kind of like make its way up to the ivory tower that way. So it's not necessarily like a one size fits all in terms of decision makers, because like you said, there's different budgets. Generally, marketing has a budget. Sustainability sometimes has a budget, but sometimes that budget can be wrapped or rolled into communication, or it may be rolled into another cost or profit center that may not have a budget sometimes. Generally, it just depends. Some companies, it has a budget, sometimes it doesn't. To your point though, HR can have its budget, where that HR budget might be even distributed to an agency. And that's the big thing we haven't talked about yet is, our relationship with agencies and how we work with, agencies. And we were talking about something else about like selling, and you made a good point there where you're talking about, kind of like, what do you get a person that like already has it all, type of thing. And, we were fortunate to work with a partner of ours that we were able to work on a project for Hanover Insurance for their salespeople. And so, this is like an event that they were doing that, they were recognizing these agents, and basically it kind of turned into like, they needed something that was like a great story that had impact, that, for someone that is already kind of at the game, like you said, you don't want to just come in and you don't necessarily just give them the most like, obvious thing. You want to give them something that they can really like reflect on. And, we see it in our, projects, because after we complete a project like that, a lot of time we're getting hit up by the employee that, and they're just like, they're emailing us, congratulating us, or just being happy that, we exist. So I think that's a part of it too, is just like, if you need help with like giving something to someone that already has everything, they're pretty accomplished, like that's kind of where we can come in and be like a specialist.
Well, I think that one of the biggest things that you all can offer is the uniqueness factor. I mean, everything that you do is essentially a one of one product. So, I mean, I'm just thinking about like, what are the greatest places that people go to experiences? Yeah, initially the thing that I thought of was like, people are just like, they would do anything to go to like any of the Tesla unveiling events, or when they opened up the Gigafactory or whatever the case, or maybe, whatever the case is. And then, hey, while you're here, we're going to turn all of everything that you see here that can be turned into something that Hamilton Perkins does, be part of the collection. Put your order in now, and then you can own a piece of what went down today. Or like at a park at Disney, at any of the Disney parks, or at the end of a movie, hey, we're going to take all the stuff that we did to create this movie, and we're going to upcycle this into HPC stuff. I don't know, Zach, what do they do with like WWE stuff? Do they reuse the canvas from the ring? I mean, like, if I'm just thinking like,
yeah. But I was thinking something in the water, something like Mighty Dream. I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of waste that could have been recycled there. I don't know if you have those conversations, but to localize it, that could be it. WWE typically sells that stuff to their fans in packages, so that they make special chairs. The ring, depending on the event, they will take the ring, cut out a little piece, put a picture of it, sell it for $400.
Well, that's what.
I mean, it's the same effect.
Yeah, when the Bills returfed their at the time it was Rich Stadium, maybe like all the fans that could buy like a 1 inch by 1 inch square of the turf for whatever the amount of money was. But
people buy the seats from stadiums too, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that people could buy.
Yeah, and I just think that the unique display is awesome.
Yeah,
all the above. I mean, every single one of those applications is something that we've kind of like either done or like we're kind of like either funny enough or in the
Yeah.
process of doing. And as long as it's sewable, that's really like that's our thing. Like if we can sew it, it'll work, you know, like it has to be something that a needle can fit through and that, you know, I mean, this is former theater signs here. You know, this stuff is like this is fabric. You know, this can be used as a you know, liner. It can be used as even for exterior. Um, as long as it's something that has some weight to it, we can then, you know, add our flair to it as far as the design points and the patterns and production and all that. So, you know, everything from that even into, you know, clothing is kind of like the newest thing that we're, you know, starting to just, you know, prototype and get stuff in, you know, stuff like, I mean, you can get it. I don't know if I can get this on here, but like, you know, stuff like this is like signs, you know, this is literally, you know, signs that have been, you know, reworked and repurposed and, you know, it's all, you know, it was already in the world, but, you know, we found a way to like remake it.
Fascinating.
We live in the Norfolk, Virginia Beach region, southeastern Virginia, 3 hours south of DC, 6 or 7 hours from New York, a couple hours from Raleigh, a couple more hours from Charlotte. Just giving people kind of a baseline of where we are. I don't think most people would think that a design collection would be created in Norfolk, Virginia. Is that a pro or a con? And what has your overall experience been creating a company like this in an area that doesn't, at least on the surface, seem to be a place where that would be the place to start, grow, and succeed in a design business?
Yeah, I think it's kind of an interesting question. I mean, I was talking to, you know, kind of a designer about this here not too long ago. I was in California and we were just like, you know, talking about because he had just got out there and I think he's been there for maybe a couple of years and you know, he's talking about like, you know, the advantages of, you know, basically being from an outsider of sorts, you know, when you're in a specific industry. I think for us it works because for one, we're not like we don't blend in, you know. I think it's kind of easier to get caught up in being like, you know, if you're in LA or New York, you could just say like, okay, you know, we're a New York brand, we're LA brand, something like that. And there's a lot of LA and New York brands. So then eventually you have a differentiating point that you have to sort of or overcome. But then I think it's almost like a pattern interrupt or a scroll stopper when it's to your point, it's like, you know, wait, you guys are from where and you do what and you've done this. It's like now you're kind of like, I think this there's almost like a certain, well, I'll say like a, what do you call this? Like a constraint, you know, even because, you know, we don't have all these like, you know, textile factories and stuff like that that are like right at hand's reach. But at the same time, you know, it creates like it's like a focus, you know, it's like the sun, you know, it's probably the best analogy. You know, if you have the big sun, it's like, okay, it's lights everything up. But then you get that magnifying glass and then it's like, it just creates this laser and it just can burn up something. That's kind of how we are, I feel like, with what we're doing. We don't have to necessarily be in a particular area. Instagram has made the world smaller. Our email has made the world smaller. You know, we're not going to say we wouldn't have gotten the Ellen deal if we lived in, you know, a different market with or did something different. But I think there definitely was something that helped us stand out. You know, I was over in Europe here not too long ago, just, you know, seeing stores and, you know, kind of, you know, reacting to, you know, what's going on over there. And, you know, I feel like there's definitely like a certain, and I met with, you know, a photographer and we were talking about like, you know, like this idea of things that like aren't, you know, it's like a foreign thing technically. So it's like you get a certain amount of, you know, it's just like we want things that basically we have or that are like not easily like readily available. It's like the whole grass is greener concept. So I'd say, you know, that's a long-winded answer, but you know, I think it, you know, your opportunities are, you know, what you make of them.
Well, and I think when something, there's so much of something, it the new thing in there or the old thing in there or the everyday thing in there becomes camouflage. So you come out of that and you're the anomaly because you're a little different, and that actually becomes a huge branding and marketing opportunity. So I like that.
Yeah.
Tim?
Yeah. Where do you do all the manufacturing right now?
So right now we have a mix of manufacturing partners. We have about 3 partners we work with. We have partners in New York, LA, and we have some overseas. If it's like under 100 units and it's more of like samples, maybe there's just a very, I'll call it like an acute like need that we're trying to solve, then we can probably easily make that here like domestically. Excuse me. But then we also make stuff like, if it's customized, it's got to be in like a mass quantity. You might have that overseas, but we may have it made here too. So we might have like all hands on deck, really trying to push. So, we've been testing out more. I've been making stuff a little bit here locally too, just like on a cut and sew, like, just getting like really rough references made. I mean, this thing here, this was made here, like right around the corner. I got other stuff here locally, but again, it's very small quantities. We're definitely, it's funny, we're in this stage or season right now where we're, communicating with like, just like new partners, like figuring out like additional capabilities, new team, just to kind of increase our capacity, and at the same time, like our output of like what we can actually do and like what's possible. So that's pretty much been my life too for the past few weeks here, is just kind of having conversations with just these different makers in the world, which has just been really awesome.
So for those that are listening, you're wearing a hoodie right now. Do you know what the ingredients are, so to speak, of the hoodie that you're wearing?
Yeah, so we received a shipment of basically showroom signs from Ferguson, if you're familiar with the company, and we're able to make pieces of almost like cut and sew pattern blocking out of the materials that we received. So you'll see like it's a lot of like plumbing, or not plumbing, but like kitchen and stuff like that themes, and even, let's see, got a shirt on underneath. So you've got more of it continued on the inside. But then we've also found, we have clients, sometimes they have just like shirts or just stuff that maybe it's like outdated, and instead of us trying to make something brand new, like they want to do something with like these shirts that have a misprint, or there's a lot of stuff that doesn't like actually get used. So we have a ton of, like I say, our library of just materials at this point is really awesome, that we can tap into for projects and collections. So that's what our stuff's all about. We're anything that's like headed for a landfill, or like doesn't have like even if it's not being used at the appropriate level, and we can raise the level of it and raise the value of it, that's
When
what
you
we'll do.
when you create the tags that go in the back of clothing items, it could be, do you say made by or made with, in terms, instead of like cotton polyester, do you do like water bottles and pineapple leaves? I mean, like, I think that would be like, even within itself, a pretty neat marketing kind of thing, because it's super unique.
Yeah. I was gonna grab some of our other teas, but I don't actually think close by. But yeah, I mean, we include the content that we have to, by law, we have to label them and kind of like include the makeup, the instructions, the origin, country of origin and stuff. And we're
That's law.
kind of always
Wow.
creating these. Yeah. I mean, you can't, particularly when you're importing stuff, and even for retail, a lot of your retail distribution points. I mean, we work with some, we're onboarded with, insert any major retailer. I mean, we're probably onboarded somehow, whether it's on a drop ship relationship, or pop up, or traditional wholesale. So a lot of time that's a part of the onboarding is we must have, UPCs, or we have to have certain, there's just certain things you need to kind of follow, and it gets kind of heavy and intense on that just alone. I kind of classify all that under project management and onboarding. So, but from simple labels like these all the way down to ones that kind of detail, what something was and what it's becoming. We kind of run the gamut, and I'm really excited to, just introduce, like, probably gone a few years with kind of just having the action that we've built over like the prior years. And, we didn't feel like enough people had even seen that, and I think that's probably still true. I don't think enough people have actually seen it. So it comes to a point where, now we have all these capabilities, we have all these materials. So, it's a game of merchandising of sorts. We don't want to like overextend, but then we want to be like focused on something. So, that's one of my words for this year. Word of the year is, focus and discipline. And that's kind of it.
I have a new question that I think I'm gonna start asking Tim on a regular basis.
Okay.
So we're gonna try it out. So I'm a huge fan of the Super Bowl.
Inspiring something new here.
Exactly. I'm a huge fan of Super Bowl. It's my favorite day of the year. I love the atmosphere. I love the aura of it. I love the actual events. I love the halftime. I love the commercials. I love it all. This year, 30-second commercial cost $10 million. I just read last year, I think maybe the first or second best commercial of all time was the Coinbase QR DVR thing moving across the screen. Thought it was brilliant. Very, very, very unique and different. This year, I heard that FanDuel, the sports betting app, is hiring Gronk for their 30 seconds to kick a 30 or 40-yard field goal, and that's literally the commercial that FanDuel is doing to.
So it's going to be a live
at
attempt?
the stadium.
Oh, wow.
I don't know.
Okay.
I would assume it's at the Arizona Cardinals field. Yeah. I'm assuming it's there. I haven't confirmed that, but Hamilton Perkins Collection has $10 million to spend on this year's commercial. What is the concept that you would put out there? And is that the right place to get it out to the world? Because it is. I mean, there's 73 spots typically in a Super Bowl from a commercial perspective. What is the HPC commercial? Yeah, Tim, I'm very well versed on the Super Bowl commercial. I love it. What is the HPC Super Bowl commercial this year, 2023?
That's a great question.
You have 30 seconds. Yeah, I thought it was going to be a good question. You have 30 second spots to do in there.
No, that's an amazing question. I think for us, what we would say is, I think our creative brief would be around, again, like raising the whole profile of this space, because if it's 73 spots, my assumption is that there's not another spot that's dedicated to sustainable fashion, upcycled materials, corporate social responsibility. So I would probably try to get some insight to like, how can we differentiate ourselves from like Coinbase and all these other things that are going on, and just have a very like targeted sort of approach to. I try to take all my best testimonials, that I could possibly fit in there, with just like everyone that's ever like ordered anything from us, and maybe like having a few of the most like representative ones first, and then I'd have like a gallery view of like maybe lots of consumers, and then I'd have like I'd have to test it, but I have to figure out what is the strongest call to action that could be something like, got upcycled, or have you upcycled, or something that's like, that would like make people think, make them stop, but then make them Google, make them search TikTok, etc.
It will be interesting to see how many companies throw up a QR code at this year's Super Bowl. It's always unique. There's 1 to 3 typically commercials that people will remember every single year, even a year later. I'm not sure that many would remember any of them. The greatest Super Bowl commercial of all time, many think, is the Apple 1984 commercial. I think that's debatable, but that or the Coinbase one are probably two of the best ones that I think are out there. But Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if I could answer that question. Yeah, that's a $10 million question, and to answer in 30 seconds. Are you talking about what would my favorite commercial be?
Well, either.
It's tough.
You like my new question? Like that's a good.
Well,
I
I
just
tell you,
thought of that. Thank you.
I'm just
Thank you for the
thinking
inspo.
like I think that we're booked for the next 3 months. So any future any guests that are going to be appearing in the future, I hope that they're doing homework and watching this episode so that they know how to answer the question.
It's kind of an
I think
extension of the
it's like a
elevator
good
pitch.
brand. Yeah, it's like a good. I was going to say it's almost like a good brand exercise to just like know what your Super Bowl pitch would be, like hypothetically, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like even a low cost, like if I was Hamilton Perkins, I think that like St. Jude has that T-shirt. This T-shirt saves lives. You know, I would almost have a loss leader in the sense of this T-shirt came from water bottles, or or I'm wearing water bottles, or something like that. Just from a brand education standpoint, um, just so that people can, because I just don't think that people really can piece it together. Like, I mean, it's kind of mind blowing.
Especially for a new business, right? It's one thing if you're Doritos and Bud Light on there, right? Or selling something, but or selling like a car that people have known about. But like when you're selling something so new, that's
and to such a big audience that is so diverse, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because my mind went to like the CMOs and the B2B partners more so. I mean, I think in terms of the consumer, but I kind of thought about like what could they easily like get, because if it's $10 million, you know, that's a lot of stuff you got to sell to make it worthwhile. And this is hypothetical because I know you got to be on a list or something before you even can spend the 10 million. You probably have to have been an advertiser for past couple of years or something. But I could see it being similar to what you said. Like, you know, the other route is like it's like showing the process. I mean, that's the thing that's like, that works well too, even on our social, is just like process, like showing it as a sign, showing it as a model.
Amazon does that with their back of the house stuff. I've seen commercials like that. I envision that's what you're saying.
Because if you start breaking down the unit economics, it starts to become doable in the sense of you know how many pieces that you would have to sell in order to break even, and
$10 million deals. You know, 10 brands, $1 million deals. You know, it's possible. So reach out if you got a brand. If you have a brand and you want to do this,
or 10 million times $3 per package of Doritos. I mean, that's. But if you here's some homework for people. Super Bowl Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Go to the grocery store and see how many Doritos you can buy. You won't.
That's our family game. We'll like make it a point to go to a grocery store. Everybody can pick one product, and then we look at everyone's shopping cart to see who has the like. Is it Bud Light? Is it Doritos? Is it potato chips? And then so we have to predict, what is going to be in the cart more than any other thing.
That's
Hamilton. What's something we haven't talked about that you want to talk about?
I think you're good, Jeff. I say if any of this making sense to you, and you're trying to come up with a holiday gift 2023 for something to do on Earth Day, you're trying to find something that really is unique, something that is on brand, something that's or maybe know someone, you may not be the person, but may know someone, and you're making an intro for us, or maybe you have a newsletter and you want to include us in that. We would encourage you to reach out. The website is hamiltonperkins.com. We would love to see if we can find a way to work together. And yeah, just, thank you. And, shout out to you guys having this thing going. I mean, I see you got hundreds of episodes, and I know consistent casting and content is definitely not easy. So, congratulations on the success.
Yeah. Appreciate you having joining us on the show. It's been a long time coming and did not disappoint. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Toodles, y'all. Thank you much.